Hi everyone, welcome back to Bible Matters. My name is Adam Erickson, and today we are going to be talking about Daniel. The book of Daniel is apocalyptic literature, and usually what we think about when we think of apocalypse is end of the world destruction. And that could be a part of it, but what apocalypse really means is revealing or unveiling. And what the book of Daniel is trying to do is reveal the truth about human relationships, specifically the truth about human violence. Violence is the big problem in the book of Daniel, as it is throughout the Bible. From the beginning to the end, we see violence happening throughout this book. And the point of Daniel is to explore how the faithful people of God should respond to that violence. And it is with non-violence. So in the beginning, in chapter 1, Daniel and his people are conquered by the Babylonians. They're taken from Jerusalem to throughout Babylonian Empire. And Daniel ends up not responding with violence against the Babylonians, but he ends up actually working his way up through the ranks of the Babylonian Empire to become an advisor for the king. And that's in chapters 1 through 6. In chapters 7 through 12, we have much more apocalyptic visions and dreams. And what's happening there is that kings of the north and the south, near the end times, are going to battle one another. They are locked in a rivalry of violence, one defeating the other and then the other winning in a battle, and it goes back and forth in an escalating rivalry of violence. Evil, it says, escalates, it increases. So from the very beginning of Daniel to the very end of Daniel, you have this apocalyptic warning about violence. And how should we respond? It's with non-violence. That's how Daniel responds. You know the story of Daniel and the lion's den. Daniel has worked his way up by this time to become an advisor to the king. Well, other advisors are jealous of Daniel, and so they turn against Daniel. All of them unite against Daniel and scapegoat him. And they go and they tell the king that he should make sure that everybody is worshiping him. Well, Daniel, as a good Jew, isn't going to worship the king. Instead, he's going to keep praying to his God. Well, the people who are jealous of Daniel know this is going to happen, and they catch him in the act of praying to his God, and they tell the king about it. And so the king has to throw Daniel into the lion's den. Well, Daniel trusts that God is going to be with him in the lion's den. He doesn't respond to violence with violence of his own. He doesn't respond with anger or resentment. He just goes into the lion's den, trusting that God will be with him and that he will be safe. And that's what ends up happening. But the king is locked into this relationship of violence. He ends up telling the people who are jealous of Daniel, he ends up turning against them and killing all of them. We see a similar pattern happening with Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The king ends up creating a statue of himself and making everybody worship this statue. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as good Jews, don't worship the statue. They only pray to their own God. Well, other people who are jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego see this, and so the king ends up throwing them into the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego end up saying to the king, we'll go into the furnace, and maybe our God will save us, maybe not, but whatever ends up happening, you're going to know that we didn't give our lives to you, we give our lives to our God. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego go into the furnace, and they end up living. In fact, there's a fourth member, a godly figure in there with them. And the king ends up seeing this and says that God was with them the whole time. So he lets them out. And then he says if anybody says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that he is going to tear those people limb from limb. Ouch. Here again, the king is stuck in this relationship of violence. All of this pattern ends up happening over and over again, and you get into the apocalyptic visions of chapters 7 through 12, where the kings are stuck in this rivalry of violence against one another. And how are we to respond to this violence? Well, earlier Daniel goes up to the king and says, listen, you can atone for your sins by caring for the poor and the weak and the oppressed. This is part of the nonviolent protest of Daniel and the prophets in general. They go up to the kings who are set on violence, and they end up saying, change your ways so that you care for the people, you don't harm them. So that's one way that the people of God are to respond. But there's another way in chapter 11, when the king of the north and the king of the south are locked in this violent battle with each other. It's almost as if the people of God are stepping back and just watching it happen. But chapter 11 says that the people are supposed to take action. And what is that action? It's not violence. It's actually this. The wise people of God are supposed to give understanding to the other people of God. Understanding of what? Well, throughout the apocalyptic visions, God tells Daniel to not be afraid. That yes, people may die, but don't be afraid. Stay true to your mission, which is to stand with the oppressed, to protest nonviolently. And the book of Daniel ends with this: happy are those who persevere. So those are my thoughts about Daniel and the ethic of nonviolence. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks.